ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Om Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. Reverence to our teachers, reverence to their teachers, and reverence to all teachers. So we always begin discussing things by remembering our teachers and offering our obeisances to them. The system of knowledge, which is the Vedic system of knowledge, reveres the teachers perhaps more than any other system because this system is a descending system of knowledge, and so that we count on our teachers for the information that we get and our knowledge. So we always start out like this. There's a prayer that we have in the Vedas, which talks about the relationship between the students and teacher. Actually, I don't really consider myself a teacher. I'm also a student, and especially in this situation where we're talking about the Vedas and Vedangas, the knowledge, Vedic knowledge, is vast. We can say it's practically unlimited. So everybody can keep learning more and more about the Vedas, can keep learning more and more Vedic knowledge. So in the Vedas themselves, there's a very nice prayer that is spoken between the students and teacher. And it goes like this: Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Harihi Om, Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahay, Tejashvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. And it means, may the Lord protect us, meaning the persons who want to learn and the person who wants to teach. May he nourish us. May we work with strong cooperation. May our study be dynamic and fruitful. May we not have disputes. Let us achieve individual peace, interactive peace, and environmental peace. So we've heard about these different types of peace which are described in the Vedas from Srila Prabhupada. Why we say Shanti or peace 3 times is because that we have in this world, we have different types of difficulties. And so these difficulties are explained as Adhyatmik, Adibautik, Adidavik. So Adhyatmik means that we have the word Atma can mean mind and body, can also refer to the soul. So Adhyatmic difficulties have to do with the mind, the body, and the soul, our individual difficulties that we have, our own personal difficulties. So individual peace we need for being able to study correctly and fully. We need interactive peace, Adhyatmik, Adidavik. We need Adibautik would be the next one. Adibautik means from other bhutas or other living beings. We need peace from others as well. Sometimes in our interactions with others, we have difficulties, and therefore we need peace from that as well. And the third type of peace is environmental peace, which we can translate as Adidavik. Davik means that we have natural calamities. It may be very cold where you are, it may be very hot where I am. It may be, we maybe have floods and fires, tornadoes and hurricanes, tsunamis, so many different types of natural occurrences. We need peace from that also if we're able to concentrate on studying. So concentration is very important for study. So in the beginning of any sort of lesson, the in the Vedic system, people pray for this type of peace, these types of peace, three types of pieces in order to easily be able to study and absorb knowledge. Today we're going to be starting a little bit of an introduction to what's called the Vedangas and I saw Vedangas and Agamas. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand what we're talking about. So we're going to have some discussion about, first of all, what it means, Vedangas and Agamas, what the meaning of the words are, because we can't have any fruitful discussion unless we define terms. And we're also going to discuss about why it's important to learn about these things and how it can help us. So what's the purpose of this sort of inquiry? So we can say from time immemorial, human beings who are sentient beings, we're sentient beings, we have an innate ability to ponder our own existence. So unlike the animals, there are, of course, other sentient beings in this world, but unlike the other sentients, other animals, we alone have this propensity to think about our own existence and to try and understand our own existence. Who am I? Why am I here? What is life about? So when we first consider our existence, the first thing that we understand is that we actually exist. So I think even in all the different philosophical systems of the world, we have this initial understanding that when we start to ponder existence, the first thing that we realize is that we exist. Of course, there are some philosophies where people try to say that they don't exist, or the soul doesn't exist, or the person doesn't exist. But we have, for example, in Western philosophy, we have René Descartes in Europe. He has a famous saying in Latin, what he says, "I think, therefore I am." So the first thing that we understand is that we exist when we start on the journey to look for absolute truth, when we start to look for meaning, philosophical meaning in life. So that's the beginning of the quest for truth. The beginning of the quest for truth is the realization that we exist. So we're not the first to search for knowledge. Human beings have been searching for this truth since time immemorial. In order to find that truth, there are different approaches. So as I was saying before, there's basically these approaches can be divided into two, the ascending and the descending. Sometimes people talk about inductive and deductive reasoning. But anyhow, Srila Prabhupada used to make it very simple. He used to say that there's a different type of system. There's one system which people might be very familiar with, which is the system of ascending knowledge, where people try to, scientific system where people try to come up with they observe phenomena, try to make some theory about it, experiment, and try to create try to understand some knowledge by the scientific method. And then there's another method where we find somebody who is learned in a particular subject, and we approach that person, and we receive knowledge like that in a descending way. So this is in the Bhagavad Gita. We have Lord Krishna is talking about this type of method of knowledge. It's descending process. We call it parampara. That parampara in Sanskrit means one after another. One after another, we hear from an authority. So now Vedic knowledge, when we talk about Vedic knowledge, because the Vedas, the Vedangas, the Agamas, these are different parts of Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge is part of a system which is given to us And it's coming from the oldest culture that is still being practiced in the world today. And sometimes people refer to this culture as Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma means eternal or perpetual essential knowledge. So, and these terms in Sanskrit, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with some of these terms, but we can just say that the Vedic knowledge is encapsulated in Sanskrit. It's explained in Sanskrit. Sanskrit's a very important aspect of this. So scholars have traced back. They've traced back this Vedic knowledge, and of course, devotees, Hindus, Vaishnavas also have their faith in this Vedic knowledge. And there are two different aspects. Of course, the scholarly aspect is that people trace this back thousands and thousands of years, let's say at least 5,500 years, back to sites like the Indus Valley or the Harappan civilization in the subcontinent of India, where they find perhaps the oldest traces of Sanskrit and the oldest traces of the Vedic civilization. And of course, Hindus and Vaishnavas trace it in our religious texts. We trace it to eternity because, of course, these things are considered eternal in Vaishnavism. So I just wanted to mention that even that because many people have some misunderstandings about the Vedic knowledge and Vedic civilization, that there was a system because in the history of India has been conquered many times. So a lot of times we see that the people who have conquered India have propounded different theories about how the Vedic civilization came about, how Sanskrit came about, how these scriptures came about. And one very old one very old theory is called the Aryan invasion theory, and that has been actually debunked for a long time. But it was that people came to India and they found this incredible store of knowledge, the Vedic culture and Vedic knowledge, and they decided that this must have come from somewhere else. It must have originated in Europe, or it must have originated in some other place. And so that theory has been basically debunked. And so there's recently an important milestone in proving this is the deciphering of the Indus Valley script, which shows that the Indus Valley script is in fact Sanskrit, and Sanskrit, being a very elaborate and very refined language, was always there in the original Vedic civilization. And so that, and also it was done definitively for the first time only a couple of years ago. So we know that during the whole COVID pandemic, there was a guy who was a scholar he was a computer programmer who had some time on his hands, as we all did during that time, and he actually was a cryptographer and also a computer programmer, and he put his mind towards breaking this Indus Valley script, which was undecipherable before, and he actually did that and proved that it was Sanskrit. And maybe not a lot of people know that. There are some videos online that people can go and look. If people are more interested in this, I'm going to post in the chat. There's some links if people want to have a look at that. It'll explain to you that how the Indus Valley script has been deciphered now. So this may even not be fully accepted by the scientific community yet, but we can hope in the near future, just as it was when they deciphered hieroglyphics many years ago, that this will become totally accepted. Apart from this, in recent years, we've also understood how the Aryan invasion theory long toured around the world, which says that Indian civilization was founded by invading Europeans, has also been proved wrong by showing that that studies in DNA that ancient Indians did not migrate from Europe, but in fact, looking at it the other way around, we now see today that science is proving that actually it was the other way around, that from DNA we see that actually from India to Europe, people went from India to Europe and rather than the other way around. So I'm going to also post another link to people who are interested in understanding that, and I'll put that in the chat too. So that's a very interesting presentation by the scientific community, debunking the whole Aryan invasions theory. Okay, so anyway, getting back to the Vedic civilization. So now that we've established the antiquity of the Vedic civilization, let's look at their approach to knowledge or their epistemology. The word epistemology means the theory of how we understand what is true knowledge. Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about fake news or fake or alternate facts. So as soon as we begin to think about ourselves and think about our relationship to the world and to God, and to try to understand truths, we have to first of all formulate a methodology for understanding knowledge. And so this is all going to, it may seem like a bit of a wind up here, quite a long introduction, but we have to very much understand the methodology behind the Vedic civilization, behind the Vedic culture, behind Vedic knowledge, and how they decided that there would be a system which would be foolproof for them understanding what is truth and what is not truth. So all this knowledge is preserved very methodically in Sanskrit, and from that time to now, Sanskrit is the language of the Vedic scholarship. Similar to in Europe, we can say in the Middle Ages or that Latin was used in Europe as a language of scholarship. So just as in the same way as Latin was used in Europe, similarly in Sanskrit has been used in India since time immemorial. Now, if we look at some statement, there's a statement by Srila Prabhupada about Sanskrit being the gateway to education, which I just want to highlight, and we can have a look at that. Here in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 15.5, Chaitanya Charitamrita 15th chapter, Adi Lila 15.5. There's a purport here where Srila Prabhupada says that, and it's talking about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he himself was a Sanskrit scholar. He was a Sanskrit scholar, and he studied grammar, Sanskrit grammar, in the place of Gangadas Pandit, and he would immediately learn the grammatical rules and definitions by heart simply by hearing them once. So this is also one symptom or one characteristic of Vedic knowledge, is that people used to try to memorize things, and memory power was very great. So Prabhupada says here in the purport, at the end of the purport, he says, anyone serious of studying the Sanskrit language should first study the grammar. It is said that simply by finishing Sanskrit grammar takes at least 12 years. That may or may not be you. But once one learns the grammatical rules and regulations very nicely, all other scriptures and subjects matters in Sanskrit are easy to understand, for Sanskrit is the gateway to education. So there, Srila Prabhupada saying Sanskrit's a gateway to education. So in fact, we have to understand when we're talking about Vedic scriptures, when we're talking about Vedic civilization, the key to it is Sanskrit, which is why I highlighted that deciphering of the Indus Valley script so many thousands of years ago, up to 5,500 years ago, there in northwest India, the Indus Valley civilization was using Sanskrit. So, and we still have those writings, and that language has not changed and is still the same. And we can receive all that knowledge from that time period unchanged. Because it's in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a gateway to education. So everything now that we've spoken about that, now let's introduce some terms and some epistemological ideas in Sanskrit. So we can now introduce Sanskrit terms along with their meaning. Sanskrit is a very scientific language, and it's based on, in fact, the word Sanskrit means perfect. One of the meanings of the word Samskrita is perfect, and another meaning is refined. Something is very fine and refined. And of course, because the Vedas are in Sanskrit and Vedic knowledge is in Sanskrit, of course, Vaishnavas and Hindus alike accept Sanskrit as being an eternal language in that sense. So, but it's a very scientific language, and it's based on verbal roots. Now, in Sanskrit, a verbal root is called a dhatu. So, verbal roots. So, not to get too much into Sanskrit grammar here, but there are all the words in Sanskrit are all derived from these roots, verbal roots. So we have a verbal root in Sanskrit, ma, and ma means to measure, to measure. So when we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about truth, right? This root ma, if we add a prefix to it, pra, it becomes prama. Prama means to measure correctly or to understand. So the first word that we should understand, or which is going to help us in understanding the methodology or epistemology of in Vedic civilization, is prama. So as a noun, prama means the basis or the foundation of something, or an axiomatic truth. An axiomatic truth is something which is true no matter what. It's always true. So prama means, we can use it as a verb, or we can use it as a noun. As a verb, prama means to measure something correctly or to understand something, to know the truth. And as a noun, it means the basis or foundation or an axiomatic truth. Some other words that we need to know, which are derived from this word ma, or this root ma, or prama, meaning the truth, are prameya. Prameya comes from prama. So prameya means the thing which is to be proved. The thing which is to be proved. Prameya. Pramana is another word that comes from it. So you see how we have prama, and from prama, we add so many endings or suffixes to ma, and we get so many different words. So in this way, actually, the number of words in Sanskrit can be practically infinite, because for every verbal root, we can add so many different endings that we can come up with so many different meanings. So prameya means, prama means the truth. Prameya means what can be proved or what is to be proved. Pramana is the method or the methodology for attaining the truth or right knowledge. So some of you might have heard of this idea, pramana. So pramana is going to tell us, the pramanas are going to tell us, or the methodology of right truth are going to help us to understand what is truth and what is false. So now we can look at the Vedic method of knowledge, the epistemology, which tells us about what pramanas or methods of attaining truth or right knowledge are actually legitimate, and what may be illegitimate. So, for example, if we want to know what is the truth today, we might turn to a news source. We might turn to a news source for truth, but we wouldn't go, for example, and go to the fiction section in a bookshop or a movie house and see. There's a difference between a documentary, for example, which is trying to tell us the truth of something, and a fictional narrative, a fictional movie or a fictional book, which is telling us something which is not true, which is made up. So we have to be able to distinguish between what is truth and what is false. So what means do we have for gaining true or right knowledge. So the Vedic culture, the Vedic civilization, the Vedic epistemology, the system of knowledge deals with this, with its idea of pramanas. So the first pramana, and I'll give you the Sanskrit for this, is called pratyaksha. And we've all heard this before, or maybe I don't know how many of us have heard this before, but pratyaksha means sense perception. Pratyaksha. It means sense perception. So we know we attain sensory knowledge, and sensory knowledge is not always perfect, but we attain sensory knowledge through the different senses. So we have these five senses, and many things in Vedic civilization, many things are delineated, and they're divided up into, and they're counted, and and they're laid out in such a way as it's easy for us to understand and remember all of these things. So we have what are called the knowledge acquiring senses. The knowledge acquiring senses in Sanskrit are called gyanendriyas. Or gyanendriyas. So the word jnana means knowledge in Sanskrit, and indriya means senses. So we have jnana-indriya. These jnana-indriyas are basically, we have the skin, which is tvach, through which we touch things. The eyes, chakshu, by which we see things or sight. The ears, shrotra, which we hear sound. The nose, grana, by which we smell, the olfactory sense. And the tongue, jihva, by which we taste. So we have, there are also other senses which we have, which are not called gyanendriyas, not senses that we use for achieve or for gaining knowledge, but they're senses which help us make use of that knowledge and help us to work. These are called the working senses. The working senses are called kamendriyas. The word karma means work, and the word senses, the indriya, of course, means senses again. So kamendriyas. So we have the gyanendriyas, right? Skin, eyes, nose, skin, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, right? Tvak, chakshu, shrotra, grana, jihva, right? Touch, sight, sound, smell, taste. And we have the kamendriyas, which are the working senses, which are the larynx, the hands, the feet, the anus, and the genitals, which are vak, pani, pada, payu, and upasta. So these are the Sanskrit words for these things. So they deal with speech, the actions of the hands, the actions of feet, the actions of defecation and procreation. So these are what are called the 10 indriyas or senses. 5 of them are for knowledge, acquiring knowledge, and 5 of them are for working with that knowledge, helping us to achieve work. So there's an 11th sense, which is mentioned, and that 11th sense is the mind, manas, in Sanskrit, manas, and that is thinking. So the mind will take the sense, the information which is gathered by the gyanendriyas, the knowledge acquiring senses, and it will then use that knowledge and come to some rational decision and use that knowledge with the kamendriyas, the senses of work. So together, these are called the 11 senses in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, they're called manas, tvak, chakshu, shrotra, jihva, vakpani, pada, payupastani. So that's, I don't want to get too technical here, but these are the names given in Sanskrit to all these different senses. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is sensory perception. So sensory perception is the first way that we gain knowledge. We can gain knowledge. So through the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, we gain sensory knowledge, pratyaksha, and our mind interprets and uses the 5 working senses to perform actions. So for example, let's give you an example. So a very common example given is the example of knowledge that fire is hot. So fire, we know that fire is hot. You know, we may have heard this, that fire is hot, but how do we actually know that fire is hot? If we use the working sense of the hands to reach out and touch the flames of a fire with our hands, then obviously we burn our fingers. The pain is transmitted, right? Because of the skin, the touch of the skin, the knowledge acquired through touch, the knowledge acquired through the skin of that pain of touching the flame is transmitted to our mind, and the mind realizes that pain and reacts by withdrawing the hands, using the working sense of the hands to withdraw from the flames. Normally, I mean, if in a sane person will, when you burn your fingers, you pull your fingers out of the fire. So this is how we gain that sensory knowledge that fire is hot. But however, this is sort of a brief example or outline of pratyaksha. Now, there's a lot more that can be said about pratyaksha, and the great acharyas and rishis and seers of the Vedic civilization have gone into pratyaksha. There are many different types of pratyaksha, and it's a vast subject. We won't go into it because this is just an introduction to different things. So we want to get beyond this. So let's not go into more depth about pratyaksha just now, but just to say another thing about pratyaksha is that we can gain true knowledge through pratyaksha. It's a pramana. It's the first method which is understood and accepted as a method of gaining knowledge. But it also has some. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't give us proper knowledge. It doesn't give us true knowledge. I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but in school, in science class, sometimes children are asked, okay, if we have three tubs of water. So we have one water which is at room temperature, one water which has ice in it, and another water which is hot water. So if a person puts his hand in the hot water. So first of all, if you put your hand in regular water, room temperature water, the water feels room temperature, and we know that. So if we take our hand, which is acclimatized to room temperature water, and put it into the water with the ice, it feels cold. If we take the room temperature hand and we put it into the hot water, it feels hot. However, if we take the hand which is in the hot water and put it in the room temperature water, it feels cold. So the room temperature water is not really cold, but it feels cold after putting our hand in the hot water. Similarly, if we have our hand in the ice water and we put it in the room temperature water, it feels hot. So the question is, if one person may put their hand in the ice water, then put it in the room temperature water and say, this is hot water. The other person may put his hand in the hot water and then put it in the room temperature water and say, no, this is cold water. For one person, it is experiencing going from hot to room temperature, and the other person from cold to room temperature. They both disagree about the temperature of the room temperature water because they're coming from a different place. So pratyaksha cannot always give us perfect knowledge. So we can disagree on that whether the room temperature water is either hot or cold, depending on whether we just had our hand in hot or cold or ice cold water. So this is an example of how the senses can be fooled. Similarly, our sense of sight, if we're in a desert or a very hot place and we look out across the road, sometimes we see shimmering light, and it appears to us to be water, but it's not. It's a mirage. It's not water. It's an illusion. So we'll come to that in a minute. But the point is that pratyaksha can give us good knowledge, but it can also fool us. It can also give us we can also be mistaken. So that's the first pramana. Pratyaksha is the first pramana, sensory perception. And right now we're hearing, we're seeing, we're getting so much information by this method of pratyaksha or sensory perception. So now the mind also, this 11th sense, it also makes logical or rational conclusions based on sensory perception. So now the second pramana has to do with the mind. The second pramana has to do with the mind, and it's called anumana. Anumana means inference or conjecture. So the mind can take the information given to us by the senses and it can then rationally or logically help us to come to some conclusion, and that conclusion can even be beyond. It can give us knowledge which is perhaps beyond sensory perception, so logical inference. So the classical example of this is when we see, for example, we look out and we see smoke. We see smoke coming from the top of a mountain. So we've experienced smoke before as an effect of fire. So there's some fire and smoke is given off from the fire due to the combustion. So when the knowledge acquiring sense of sight sees that smoke in our mind, because we have seen before, because we've previously seen fire and we've previously seen smoke come from fire. So our mind thinks back and remembers, oh, there's smoke. We've seen smoke before. When did we see smoke before? When there was combustion, when there was fire, there was smoke. So the mind puts these together and realizes that only when there's not only when there is smoke when there's smoke that there's also fire. This is the conjecture, rationalization. We're not actually seeing the fire. We're not actually experiencing sensory perception of the actual fire, but we assume that there's fire because we see the smoke. But then this is a rationalization, and this can also be faulty. So we can deduce, or we can rationalize, or we can understand some true knowledge through rationalization and through understanding of the mind, but it can also be false. That can also be false, right? Because, for instance, we might see the smoke, and the fire might have been put out, and still there's smoke. There may not be any fire. Or we might see smoke, but it may just be a cloud. It may just be a gray cloud. It may not be the smoke. It may not be smoke emanating from a fire. It may be from some other cause. So when the knowledge acquiring sense of sight sees the smoke, the mind realizes not only that there is smoke on the mountaintop, but rationalizes that there's also fire on the mountaintop, which is unseen. There is also a lot more in depth that we can say about in this discussion of anumana. And with all these pramanas, all this methodology, all this epistemology that is Vedic epistemology, right, which is the sages and the seers and the rishis, they go into much depth among these things. These two pramanas are especially useful, however, when we're dealing or trying to understand things which can be sensed with the material senses or intuited by rational logical thinking. But they have their limitations. For example, if we wanted to discuss something or know something beyond the material senses, beyond rational thought, that would be very difficult. So that would be impossible by using these two pramanas. And also these pramanas have their limitations. So what are some of the limitations that we have with these first pramanas? So we can also look at in Chaitanya Charamrita, there's a section here, Adi Lila 7, verse 107. Okay, so here is very similar. So we have a verse here, Brahma, Pramada, Vipralipsa, Karna Patava, Ishvera Vakya, Nahi Dosha E Saba. The material defects of mistakes, illusions, cheating, and sensory insufficiency, inefficiency, do not exist in the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so here Prabhupada is talking about these four. In the purport, he also talks about these different types of illusions. For example, very, very standard illusion, which is talked about here, false knowledge. Seeing a rope in the dark and thinking that it's a snake, seeing an oyster shell, walking on the beach, seeing an oyster shell and thinking that, here he says gold, but it's more the usual explanation is we see a shell and we think it's silver. So who hasn't done this? Walked on the beach and seen a shell, you see that mother of pearl, it looks like silver, and we think somebody's dropped a coin, we pick it up and it's actually a shell. Or we go into a dark room and we see a shape on the floor and we think, oh, that's a snake, but it's actually a rope. So there are these mistaken ideas. And so these problems come up with the pramanas of pratyaksha or sensory perception and anumana inference. So I would put them in a slightly different order. So let's talk about them first. Sensory deficiency. We talked about the senses, the kamendriyas and the gyanendriyas and the kamendriyas. So we have those knowledge acquiring senses. We have the ability to see, to smell, to hear, to taste, to touch. But we have a problem. I can, for example, if I want to look out and there's something blocking my vision, if I want to smell something but something's blocking my nose, if I want to, so sensory deficiency is called in Sanskrit karanapatava. It means that the senses are unable to act. They're unable to give us the knowledge that we need. So if that happens, then we can't get that sensory perception. Or the senses are defective in the example we gave of looking at a mirage or looking at the heat in heat on the road. We think it's water, but it's actually not water. It's actually heat, right? So this is a defect in the senses. Our eyes are telling us something which is not correct. If anybody who's ever been to a magic show, right? Your eyes are telling you something, but it's not correct. The magician is cheating you, right? So he's able to do that because of your sensory deficiency. If your senses were absolutely perfect, then no magician could ever fool you with any sort of trick. So sensory deficiency comes first. The second thing is because of that sensory deficiency, there's a possibility that we get tricked, and that means that we're in illusion. The next thing is pramada. Pramada means illusion. So illusion comes from that sensory deficiency. So pramada. So karanapatava and pramada. Then if we then act on that illusion, so we mistakenly thought that the pot was cool in the kitchen, and we went to pick it up and we burned ourselves. It was actually hot. So then we make a mistake. That mistake is called Brahma. Brahma. Brahma means mistake. So from sensory deficiency, then comes an illusion. Then we can make mistakes. Now, if we continue to make that mistake, if we continue to make that state, if we don't correct ourselves, and we actually teach others something which is mistaken, some form of knowledge which is mistaken, then the last problem of sensory perception and inference comes about, which is called vipralipsa. Vipralipsa means cheating. So I can't understand something properly. I am then in illusion. That causes me to make a mistake. And then after that, I teach that mistake and to somebody else, and that other person thinks, oh, this person knows, so I'll ask him, and I tell this mistake to someone else. That is cheating. That is cheating. So these are the four possible mistakes that we have when we rely on only the mind and the senses for acquiring knowledge. Yeah. So people may ask, okay, is there a better way than pratyaksha, sensory perception, and anumana, logical inference or rationality, to understand the truth? Is there a better way? So not that these things, pratyaksha and anumana, are useless, because obviously we're listening right now. We have to listen right now to somebody. We have to use pratyaksha and anumana in our daily life, and so we rely upon these two. We rely upon these two things to gain knowledge all the time. But is there, especially when we're talking about things which are beyond, which are transcendental or beyond material things, is there a better way? So these are the first two pramanas, the first two parts of epistemology, means of acquiring true or proper knowledge, pratyaksha and anumana, sense perception and rational logical inference. So the next pramana is called shabda. Shabda means it literally means sound, but we can take it here to mean authoritative statement. So it's a mean of relying on the statement of an authority. So how we know something is an authority or someone is an authority, that is we can go into that in more detail, but because we want to get to more of our main subject, let's just say for now the idea of shabda is aptavakya, the words or the words of an authority. So this sort of knowledge, means of knowledge, will be useful to understand things which are beyond sensory or rational understanding. So according to the Vedic system of authority, there's different levels of authority. So let's just talk about authority for a moment here. So if we want to get shabda, pramana, or authoritative statements, there are different authorities, and they're classed in different levels according to the Vedic system. So the ultimate authority, according to the Vedic system of knowledge, the ultimate authority is what is called the Veda itself, the Veda. And this Veda is called Shruti Pramana, Shruti Pramana. So Pramana, again, means is the means of understanding knowledge. And the word Shruti comes from Shru, and it means to hear. So Shruti is that which is heard. And the Veda is heard because now the Vedas are so ancient. They're understood to be eternal by Vaishnavas and Hindus, but they're considered so ancient that they existed even before the idea of writing came into existence, or writing them down. So they exist in sound form. And so Shruti literally means that which is heard, and it refers to the Veda itself, which is considered eternal, unauthored, and intuited by the Vedic seers, who are called rishis. So we've heard this before, Rishi, Narada Rishi, or Sanaka Rishi. There's different rishis that we've heard of before. And the word rishi means a seer. But these rishis, the Vedic rishis, so sometimes the idea in Vaishnavism and Hinduism is that the Vedas were not written down and authored by anybody, because it's understood that any text which is authored by someone in this world will also have inherently some of those problematic, those problems that we talked about before: Brahma, Vipralipsa, Karanatva, and you see, I can't even remember the fourth one. Okay, so those four problems come about when texts are authored by people in this material world, right? So the Vedas are considered to be eternal. The rishis thus are not the authors of the Vedas, but they've realized the Vedas through their meditation, their mature meditation. So by sitting and thinking and opening their minds, the Lord has intuited the Vedas, or the Veda, to the rishis, and the rishi has then spoken or given the verbal, the sound vibration of the Veda, which is eternal. So now let's discuss a little bit about the Veda. What does the word Veda mean? So the word Veda means knowledge, basically, and comes from the Sanskrit root. Once again, the dhatu in Sanskrit, the root of the word is vid, to know. And vid has different meanings also. Well, we won't go into that. But the Veda, originally the Veda, is the knowledge. So somebody may say, well, okay, your Veda is also written by somebody, and it's also, we can say they're also, therefore, because it's authored, it must have some of those problems like that you mentioned before. But the idea is that the Veda is not authored, it's unauthored. Then somebody can say, well, no, we see it seems to be authored. So originally the Veda was one. Nowadays, when people talk about the Vedas, they talk about divisions of the Vedas, but originally the Veda was one, and that Veda was known as the Ekayana Shaka, the original Veda. Shaka means branch, Shaka, and Ekayana means one, the one branch of the Vedas. So this is also supposed to be the origin, not only of the Vedas that we have today, which are divided up by a person called Vedavyasa. We've all heard of Vedavyasa. Vyasa actually means a compiler. So Veda, he's the compiler of, so it's more of a title than a name. Vedavyasa, he's the compiler of the Veda. He's the person who took all of the sages' utterances of the Vedas, or the sound of the Vedas, and compiled them into different samhitas, different texts, right? So originally, though, the Veda was one thing, and it was called the Akayana Shaka of the Veda, the original Veda. And from the Veda is also considered to be the Agama has come. So now there are different Agamas and there are different Vedas. So let's talk a little bit about what Agama and Veda and means, right? So Veda, the word Veda is also called Nigama. So Nigama also means Veda. And whatever is not Veda is called Agama. So what's not Veda is called Agama. So it may come from the Veda, but it is not the Veda, therefore it is called Agama. So we have, for example, there are different Agamas. There are Shaiva, Shakta, and Vaishnava Agamas. Let's talk about the Vaishnava Agamas. There are two Agamas. Agama is a very interesting word. It means that which was asked by Devi to Shiva about Vishnu, right? So that's one meaning of the word Agama, right? So Agama has to do with the Agamas are classes of texts, of Vedic texts in Sanskrit, which come from the original Veda, and they are classified in Vaishnava Agamas are classified as Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa. These are the two types of Agamas for Vaishnavas. Pancharatra means that which was spoken about five forms of God, or over 5 nights. And the Vaikhanasa it was also spoken by another rishi called Vaikhanasa Rishi. Okay, so these are two different Agamas. Agama means it's a tantra, tantrayate. Trayate means to do something. So to reach him, tantrayate. Tantra means to reach him. Methods of reaching God, or methods of worshiping God. So these are methods of worshiping God, the Agamas. The Nigamas deal with the Vedas. Now the Vedas were originally one. And somebody may say, well, okay, so they weren't, how do you mean they were not authored? The Vedas are there are a couple of two main qualities that the Vedas have. One is that they are unauthored. So they're said to be the breathing of the Supreme Person, the breathing of God, like that. So they're not authored, they're just the breathing of God. And therefore, because God is eternal, the Vedas are also eternal. So the Vedas are eternal, they are unauthored, they're the breathing of God, right? And they are therefore also called Svata Pramana. Svata Pramana means they are self-proving. They're self-proving. So they're axiomatic. So if people want to read a little bit more about the subject of the Vedas, Srila Prabhupada's only given us one text, which is truly part of the Vedas. And that is Sri Upanishad. And if people go and read Upanishad, that's a part of the Vedas. The Upanishads are a part of the Vedas, which I'll explain in a minute. And we can go to his introduction to Sri Upanishad, and we can read more about the Vedas. So if we look at the introduction to the Vedas here, teachings of the Vedas, in England, in London, Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture on the Vedas in 1969, October 6th, and he explained about the Vedas. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's subject is the teaching of the Vedas. What are the Vedas? The Sanskrit verbal root of the Veda can be interpreted variously, but the purport is finally one. Veda means knowledge. Any knowledge you accept is Veda. For the teachings of the Veda are original knowledge. In the conditioned state, our knowledge is subjected to many deficiencies. Anyway, we can read the whole thing. Prabhupada explains, if you go down further here, he explains about how there can be illusion, there can be mistakes, there can be cheating, and there can be delusions in our senses, in our sense perfection. But he talks down here about how Veda is considered to be perfect. The knowledge coming from the Veda is called Shruti, down here, and refers to the perfect knowledge. And he gives the example of, if you want to know who your father is, you can go around and you can try in the inductive system. You can ask every person, are you my father? Are you my father? Are you my father? You'll never come to the end because there are billions of people in the world. But if you simply go to your mother and you ask, who's my father, she knows immediately and she will tell you. So she's the authority and she can tell you that. So that's his example that he gives. And then further on down here, he talks about Sabda Pramana, which we're talking about now, which is a method of hearing and hearing from, first of all, the Shruti, which is the Veda. And how if somebody says that, and Prabhupada talks also about different methods of gaining knowledge, inductive and deductive. And he says down here further that if somebody says something from the Veda, it's considered to be, Vedic injunction has to be accepted because it is Swata Pramana, it is accepted. So going back to our point here. So Agama, a Veda or Nigama, is the Shruti Pramana. It's the unauthored, eternal, accepted truth, right? Agama comes from the Vedas, comes from the Akina Shaka of the Vedas, is derived from that. If we read in the Pancharatra Agama, it describes that, right? It's based on the Veda, but it's not Veda. So we have first of all two classes, different classes. So we have Shruti. After Shruti, we have Smriti, that which is remembered. So once having heard the eternal and unauthored Veda, right? Then we have what is not Veda, which is called Agama or sometimes Smriti, right? So then how do we get the Vedas as we have them today? So we were talking about originally they were one, the breathing of God, the eternal unauthored breathing of God. And there was a person, Vedavyasa, great sage. He divided these things up, the Veda up into four. We can have a look here. The Veda, so we have the Vedas divided up into four. So we have Rig Veda, then we have Yajur Veda, which again is divided into two, Sama Veda and Atharva Veda, right? Each one of these Vedas also it has four sections to it. So a little bit about the Veda. The Rig Veda contains 10 mandalas or 10 sections. It can also be divided into 8 astakas, and it contains just over 1,000 suktas or prayers, hymns. And these are hymns which are used in the worship of God. The Vedic worship of God was through the Vedic sacrifices. So the Rig Veda it's the largest of the Vedas, and it contains these hymns, right? So that is the Samhita section. Now there's these different sections of each Veda. Each Veda has different sections. Why are there two Vedas here, the Shukla Yajur Veda and the Krishna Yajur Veda? So some people, they just say, okay, Shukla means white, Krishna means black. So we have the white Yajur Veda and the black Yajur Veda. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. The Rig Veda is the hymns which are used. The Yajur Veda, the Yajus deals with Yajus, or which comes from the root Yaj, to worship or to offer sacrifice, right? There are different methods of offering sacrifice at different times, different places, but the Vedic sacrifice was normally a fire sacrifice. And there are different sacrifices given in the Vedas. These are called Shrauta sacrifices because they have to do with Shruti. Shruti is the Vedas, that which is heard, whereas we have Smarta, which have to do with Smriti, other different types of sacrifices. So in the Vedas, we have these Shrauta sacrifices, right? So in the Shrauta sacrifices, the hymns which are used are coming from the Rig Veda. The Yajur Veda deals with the methodology also. It deals with the sacrifice itself. So the hymns of the Rig Veda, each individual verse is called a Rik. In the Shukla Yajur, the Yajur Veda is called it's also called, they have different verses in the Yajur Veda which deal with the sacrifice. The Sama Veda contains many of the verses from the Rig Veda, but are put to music. And the Atharva Veda has all sorts of information about guarding the sacrifice and making the sacrifice proper and keeping it together. So these different Vedas have different purposes, and that's why Vedavyasa divided them into different samhitas. So we have these samhitas. When people usually talk about the Vedas, they talk about the samhitas of the collection of hymns. After the collection of hymns, we also have other Vedic texts called Brahmanas. Brahmanas have to do with the methodology of performing the sacrifice. So we have to, first of all, learn the hymns of the Vedas in order to do a sacrifice. Then we have to learn, we have to take the instructions in the Brahmanas on how to perform the sacrifice. And thirdly and fourthly, we have different parts of the Vedas, which are called the Aranyakas and the Upanishads, which give us, the Aranyakas are for a more tending towards more philosophical understandings. For Aranya means forest. It's for the people who have gone to the forest to meditate and to retire. And then the Upanishads are for purely philosophical reasons. They give us the philosophy behind the sacrifice and everything like that. So we can think of also, when we think about the Varnashrama system, the system of society, how society was divided up, which comes from the Veda. In the Rig Veda, we've heard about this Varnashram system. In the famous Purusha Sukta, verse of the Purusha Sukta, which comes in the 10th mandala, 90th Sukta of the Vedas, right? Su Ukta. Su means good, Ukta means utterance. So what is a good utterance? That is a Sukta. So the Vedas Suktas. So we have the Purusha Sukta. Purusha Sukta is Brahmanosya Makamasid Bahu Rajanyakutaha Uru Tarasya Vaishaha Padbhyam Sudro Jayata. So it talks about the Veda Purusha. It talks about society as being divided up into four types of people. Four types of people means that there are Brahmanosya Mukamasid, the head in society, the brains, the intellectuals, the intelligentsia, right? These are called Brahmins. Those who help to defend the society or to do the work of administration, right, are considered to be like the arms of the Veda Purusha, the personality of the Veda, let's say, right? These are called Kshatriyas, right? The administrators. Then we have the entrepreneurs, the people who do the economic development. These are called the Vaishyas, right? And then we have workers, people who assist those people, and these are called the Shudras. So Brahmanosya, these are considered to be the thighs or the stomach of the Vaishyas, and the Sudras are considered to be the feet of the Veda Purusha. So if we conceive of Vedic society like a person, he has these four main parts to him. He has the head, he has the arms, he has the stomach, and he has the feet, like that. And these all work together to make the society run properly. So this is described in Rig Veda in the Purusha Suktam. So when we talk about Purusha Purusha can mean the supreme person, and it can also mean the individual person, but it also means, it can, in this sense, this verse is talking about society. Brahmanosya Makamasid, Bahu Rajanyakutaha, Uru Tarashyad Vaishya, Padbhyam Sudro Jayata, like that. So also, we have in the Varnashram system, we have the Varnas, those sections of society, and there are some later on in the Shmitis, later on in the Shmiti writings and in India, there was an idea that these different types of persons in society were to be understood by birth, but in actual fact, in the Veda, in the original Veda, we see, right, that there's no mention there of birth. The mention is of only the place in society that people are working, doing their work. So people who are the intelligentsia, people who are the administrators, people who are the entrepreneurs, and people who are the workers. These are the different four parts of society like that. At the same time, we also have this idea in Vedic society, in the Varnashram system, of going from different parts of life, starting from birth and going to death, and there are different categories of people according to what stage of life they're in. And so these different sections of the Vedas are meant for those different people also. So in the beginning, in the formative years, in our young life, we go to school and we learn. So in the Vedic schools called Gurukulas, the word guru means teacher. Gu means darkness and Ru means light. So someone who takes you from ignorance to light, let's say from darkness to light, means from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. So guru is a teacher. So guru is a teacher. Kula, the word kula means family. So traditionally, the Gurukulas were run as a family institution. The guru and his wife would teach several or many students, and the students would live with them like that in a family situation. And they would learn Vedic, they would learn the hymns of the Samhitas, they would learn the Vedas, they would learn the Vedas off by heart. So this is the first stage of life, which is sometimes called brahmacharya, means student. It actually means a person who is studying Brahman. Brahman means that which is, Brahman means everything. So Brahman, the word Brahma means great. So the greatest means God. The greatest means everything, this universe, everything that's contained within the universe, you, me, matter, God, everything is Brahman. So that people who are studying spiritual things, right? They are called brahmacharis, right? They brahmacharis. So the studying section of life, the beginning of life, is meant for studying the Shrutis, studying the hymns of the Vedas. So these Samhitas are especially for those persons. The next thing is after studying, after knowing, after learning the hymns, then you have to learn how to use the hymns in the sacrifice. Then we have to study the Brahmana section, So that is for the Grihastas. The Grihastas were the ones who were the householders. Griha means house. A person who owns a house is a Grihasta. A person who lives in a house, lives separately. He has graduated from the school, from the Gurukula, and he's married, and together, the husband and wife together, they are in the house, and therefore this is the idea of Varnashram here. So they're in the house, and they are the ones who perform the sacrifices with the knowledge acquired in the Gurukula. So they study the Brahmanas. Then after that, there is the stage of Vanaprastha. In the stage of Vanaprastha, the Aranyakas, people go to the forest. It means a retired life. Retired means that they are no longer working, they're no longer producing byproducts, they're no longer procreating like that, and having children. And so they're working towards the end of their lives, and to separate themselves perhaps from so many worldly concerns until ultimately. So the Aranyakas are for those persons in the forest, and the Upanishads deal with spiritual philosophical aspects, and so therefore people are this is for the stage of life called sannyasa or nyasa, which means actually means to place. The word nyasa means to place, and it means to surrender, basically to surrender and to devote oneself completely to a life of renunciation and looking forward to the next period after life, the afterlife, the next life, or moksha, or liberation. So these are for different people like that. If we want to see in Prabhupada's books where he's mentioned about the Upanishads, we can also look at Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 7:108. So if we look there, we can see that it mentions the absolute truth is described in the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras. Now, Brahma Sutras, the Upanishads deal with all philosophical, they are part of the Vedas, and they deal with all sorts of philosophical truths, right? And in order to understand them, Vedavyasa, having compiled and divided up the Ekayana Shaka, the original Veda, which is eternal, which is one, having divided it up into different sections, right? He then realized that in the Upanishads, philosophical inquiry is dealt with, different subjects of philosophy are dealt with in different Upanishads. So what he wanted to do is he wanted to systematize that. He wanted to systematize that, so therefore he wrote the Brahma Sutras. So the word sutra can also mean a string on which we hang different gems or different pearls, and we make a necklace. So a sutra is a string, it's a thread like that. So sometimes we have today, people will talk about an email thread. People will talk about, there's even a platform, a social platform called Threads, right? So thread, the idea of a thread is it's a small thing, but it keeps everything together like that. You could hang all these other wonderful items off a thread like that. So the word sutra in Sanskrit, the Vedic knowledge became so voluminous that it couldn't possibly be learned in one lifetime by one person. So if you wanted to study a particular subject, you had to study it and you had to get a synopsis. So just like today, when people are taking an exam in university or something like that, they like to get a synopsis. And so in that synopsis, it'd be like the cliff notes, the notes. What are the notes? People take shorthand or they take notes, and they want to get the important parts of a subject. So the sutras are there, and they are aphorisms. And we can talk about sutras some more sometime, if people are interested. But there's a system in Sanskrit of making a sutra, and the idea is to make an aphorism or to make a rule or statement which has got the most meaning in it in the least number of words or letters, like that. So if you can make a very, very short rule which encompasses so much information, that's a sutra. So Brahma again talks about Brahman, about everything, about the supreme, about this universe, about spiritual knowledge. So the sutras which deal with Brahma or Brahman, right, are called the Brahma Sutras. Vedavyasa wrote these Brahma Sutras to systematically go through spiritual truths and explain them in a very, very succinct and very short way, like that. So there are other types of sutras. Because Vedic knowledge became so voluminous, there are other great sages who have made sutras on different topics. So we have the Kama Sutras, the Brahma Sutras, the Dhamma Sutras, the Artha Sutras, the Griha Sutras. There's so many different types of sutras. We'll go into it. But here we're talking about the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras, dealing with philosophy as part of the Vedas, like that. So down here in the purport here, Prabhupada lists 108 Upanishads. So he lists 11 chief Upanishads: Isha, Kena, Kata, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitreya, Chandogya, Brihad Aranyaka, Svarashvatara. But then there's another Upanishad called Muktika Upanishad, in which there are 108 listed. So these are understood as, this is called the Muktika Upanishad, the Muktika canon, sometimes people call it, that some people, many people accept these. There may be more Upanishads than this, there may be less Upanishads than this, according to different groups, people accept more or less, but this is a general list given by Srila Prabhupada. Just thought I'd interject that when we're talking about Upanishads. So if we go back to this understanding about the Vedas, so we have the Samhita, the Aranyak, the Samhita, the Brahmana, the Aranyaka, and the Upanishad sections of each of these Vedas. So there are Rig Veda, Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, Upanishad, Shukla Yajurveda, Krishna Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. Now, I didn't mention how there's a story also about how the Yajurveda came to be in two parts, right? So the difference between the Shukla Yajurveda and the Krishna Yajurveda is that the Shukla Yajurveda, in the Veda, there is sometimes prose, and there is sometimes shlokas. There are sometimes verses or poetry. So much of Vedic literature and Sanskrit is in verse form. Shloka, we say shloka form, right? Shloka means a verse. And shloka actually means a particular type of verse. So sometimes you'll find people say, no, that's not a shloka, that's just this type of verse or that type of verse. But in general, shloka means verse. So Sanskrit Sanskrit is a lot of Sanskrit is in verse, and verse, why it's in verse? Because verse helps us to understand or helps us to memorize. When something's in verse, it helps us to memorize it. So because before writing everything, the Vedas were given to us in sound form only. So the verses help us to memorize those things. So the Shukla Yajurveda is where the where the prose and the verses are separate. The Krishna Yajurveda is where they're mixed, like that. So there's a traditional story about this. A traditional story is that there was a great sage called Yajnavalkya, and we'll talk about him a little bit more later. There was a person called Yajnavalkya, and he was studying from Vedavyasa, and he was studying the Yajurveda. And as happens sometimes, there was a slight disagreement between the teacher and the student. And so Vedavyasa asked him, he said, please, everything that I've given you, all the knowledge that I've given you, I want you to give me that back, like that. So it's said, this is a story, Yajnavalkya said that he then vomited out all of the knowledge which Vedavyasa gave him. So at that time, there were these little birds that came along and they ate up the vomit, like that. It's an interesting story, like that. So the birds are called titiri birds. And actually here on Maui in Hawaii, we have these birds. They have them in India as well. They're called, in English, it's called a Franklin partridge, okay? But in Sanskrit, it's called a titiri bird. So from that titiri bird, from the idea of the idea is, the analogy given here in the story is that the prose and the verse of the Yajurveda were mixed up. Because when you vomit, obviously all the food that you've eaten is all mixed up. When you eat it, it's not mixed, but in your stomach, it becomes mixed. So the idea here is that the Veda became mixed, and when it was mixed, it came out. And so that is why the Krishna Yajurveda, one of the branches of the Krishna Yajurveda is called Taittiriya. And one of the Upanishads that we saw there, which is part of this Krishna Yajurveda, is called Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya means coming from the titiri, that little bird that ate the vomit of Yajnavalkya. Okay, so that's the story behind it. That's the story behind the mixture of the Veda. So that's why I put it down here as 2a and 2b, the Shukla Yajurveda and the Krishna Yajurveda. Now, it's also said that Yajnavalkya went on to learn the Veda again in a form without the prose and the poetry or the slokas being mixed. So when we say prose, we say gadya in Sanskrit, and when we say poetry, we say padya. So we have those different types, prose and poetry, forms of Vedic of Sanskrit. We have the prose and poetry. So here we have the Shukla Yajurveda was then taught to him by the sun god, Surya, and in a way that was is now called the Shukla Yajurveda. So interesting enough, Shukla Yajurveda is more common in North India, and Krishna Yajurveda is more common in South India. There is a form of Shukla Yajurveda down in South India called the Kanva Shaka, which is according to a rishi called Kanva. In North India, it's called the Madhyandina or Vajrasanei, which means that it's coming from the sun god. So there are different branches of these Vedas. So when we talk about Rig Veda, Yajurveda, and Samaveda and Atharva Veda, there are different branches which are called shakas. And today we have a few of them left. We have, but in the literature, it's talked about that there are many, many, many more. Like there are 1,000 branches of the Samaveda, but we only have 3 left. And we have of course, the Vedas are eternal, but we don't always have all the Vedas. So this is a description of the Vedic literature and the different sections of the Vedic literature as it was divided up by Vedavyasa. Okay, so this is Veda or Shruti. This is called Shruti, like that. So to go back to our discussion. So we had this idea about Yajnavalkya and the Yajurveda. And so the Veda, again, is called Apurushaya. Apurushaya. Purusha means man or human, right? Apurushaya means if you put in the beginning of any word in Sanskrit, it negates that word. So apurushaya means not created by man, not created by human beings, unauthored, and is eternal. It's said to be the breathing of the Supreme Lord again, and is called swata pramana, or self-proven, faultless knowledge. Prabhupada in his Isopanishad, it explains why the Veda is important in Isopanishad that by Prabhupada in his introduction lecture there. We're not going to go through the whole lecture there. Everybody can read that in the chat. There's the link to the introduction to Sri Isopanishad to read about Swata Pramana and to read about the Vedas, as Prabhupada's mentioned. From the Vedas, in order to understand the Vedas, we have the Vedangas coming to our, sorry to take so long, but to get to our point, we have the Vedangas. So Vedangas look like this. So we have the Vedas here as being the root knowledge, the Shruti. And from the Vedas, if we can consider the Vedas like a tree, we have these different Vedangas that are coming off of like leaves on a tree or branches on a tree, like that. So the branches and the leaves of a tree are how the tree gains nourishment or how the tree grows, right? So in order to understand or in order to help grow the tree of Vedic knowledge, these different sections came about, these different Vedangas. The word Veda means knowledge, of course, and Anga means a limb. So these are like the limbs of the Veda. So these are also to be understood as 6 in number, Vedangas. If we go back to this, right, we can see here they are delineated. So Veda Angas. What are Vedangas? So they are delineated as Shiksha, Vyakarna, Nirukta, Chanda, Jyotisha, and Kalpa. So Shiksha means phonetics. It has to do with the science of sound and how to pronounce the letters correctly. This is the first thing that we learn in school today. Even when we go to school, we have to learn the alphabet. We have to learn how to pronounce words, how to pronounce syllables, right? Then second to that, actually, we can group these in a different way, right? Shiksha, and then after Shiksha, we have another one, Chandas, or prosody, or poetic meter, because the Vedas are in verses or slokas, right? So we have to know how to pronounce the Vedas. When we're learning the Samhitas, we have to know how to pronounce the words, and we have to know how to go through the verse. So we have to know the different meters, where there are different Vedic meters, which we can talk about a little bit if we talk about more about Chandas. There are people might be no, sloka meter, which is also called Anustup meter, which is 4 lines of 8 syllables. And there are other Gayatri meter, 3 lines of 8 syllables. There are 4 lines of 11 syllables. So we have Anustup, Priti, Pankti, Tristup, Jagati, all these different Vedic meters like that. So these first 2 have to do with speaking. And the second 2, Vyakarna and etymology, Vyakarna and Nirukta. Vyakarna means grammar. We have to learn grammar in order to understand Sanskrit. And we have to learn etymology. Etymology means the word meanings. A little bit more about this in a minute. And then Jyotisha is astronomy. It also means, it also would include Jyotisha, and also Kalpa would include ritual, would include mathematics and astronomy, right? So Jyotisha includes astronomy. And then Kalpa, we have is ritual, like that. Now, there's another way that we can conceive of these angas, of these Vedangas. If we consider the Veda to be like a person, like a Purusha, so the Veda Purusha, then we can conceive of the Veda like this. So I can imagine the Veda is a person. So we can start with Shiksha. Shiksha is the first, because breathing, we breathe through the mouth, but we also breathe through the nose. When we speak, we tend to breathe through the nose and breathe out through the mouth. So the nose has to do with pronunciation, has to do with what's called Shiksha, the Shiksha Vedanga. After Shiksha, we have Vyakarna. Vyakarna is grammar. So Vyakarna helps us to understand the words. So Shiksha helps us with the pronunciation. Vyakarna, helps us to understand the meaning of the words. So that is the mouth to speak. In order to speak, we have to know proper grammar, Vyakarna. So the nose and the mouth. Shiksha Vyakarna, Nirukta, we can speak, but we can't understand anything unless we know the meaning of words. The meaning of words is etymology, Nirukta. So the Veda Purushas' ears are considered to be Nirukta. After speaking and hearing and understanding, Shiksha Vyakarna Nirukta, Jyotisha, he sees, he can see with his eyes. Jyotisha allows us to see past, present, and future. So it's astronomy, astrology, all these sort of things. And then Chanda helps us to go through the verse, meter, poetic meter, so it's his feet. What did we say? We said Jyotisha is his eyes, Chanda is his feet, Kalpa is the hands by which he performs the sacrifice, performs the worship, like that. So the hands are useful for doing those things after we have all those other things. So this is a way of understanding the Vedangas. So now let's look at some background on on these things, Dharma and the Vedangas. So as well as the Vedangas, I wanted to point out, as well as the Vedangas, there's also said to be not just 6 Vedangas. So there are the Vedangas, but there are also other parts in the Vedic system of knowledge, which with other texts which deal with knowledge. So those other texts are also listed here. So they're called Vidyasthanas, or Vidya means knowledge. It also comes from the word vid, the root vid, which means knowledge, to know, from which we get Veda. So Vidya means knowledge, and Sthana means a place, or star. The word star it means to stand. So standing in a particular place. So the Vidyasthanas, or the places of knowledge. Also, the other places of knowledge, which we're talking about now, is we're talking about not the Shruti. So up here we had the Vedas, which is called the Shruti, which is the highest form of proof of knowledge, right? Then the Vedangas, which help us to understand the Vedas, right? And then we have the Smriti, we have the other ancillary texts, Itihasas and Puranas. Itihasa means what was said or what was done, right? It's a history, and the Puranas are the traditional texts. And then we have Dharma Shastras, which are coming from the Vedangas here. Dharma Shastras are actually coming out of Kalpa Vedanga. And then we have Nyaya, logic, Tarka, argumentation, Vaisheshika, also discussion, Sankhya, which is a system of counting. Lord Kapila talked about Sankhya, about we can say it's a Vedic form of science. Yoga, right? This is yoga. Purva Mimamsa, Anuttara Mimamsa. The word yoga means the science of how to link with the Supreme, and Mimamsa meaning discussion. There's a Purva Mimamsa, Anuttara Mimamsa. The Purva Mimamsa is also sometimes called Karma Kanda because it deals with the sacrifices of the Vedas, whereas the Uttara Mimamsa is called Vedanta, which deals. So basically, Purva Mimamsa deals with the Samhitas and the Brahmana section of the Vedas. Uttara Mimamsa deals with the Aranyakas and the Upanishad section of the Vedas, like that, which is called the Karma Kanda, and this is called the Jnana Kanda, which has to do with karmas, or performing different sacrifices, and this has to do with understanding spiritual knowledge, or Jnana Kanda. So then we have 4 other, and there sometimes these are. So we have the Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, and Artha Shastra, right? Kautilya Artha Shastra. Gandharva Veda has to do with singing. Dhanurveda has to do with military science. Ayurveda is the science of life, medicine. So these are also attached to the 4 Vedas. The Ayurveda comes from the Rig Veda, Dhanurveda from the Yajurveda, Gandharva Veda singing from the Sama Veda, which has more swaras or more Vedic tones, and the Artha Shastra, right, coming from Atharva Veda, like that. There's also some definitions which which say that there are other Vidyasthanas, but this is usually understood as the Vidyasthanas. So here's some verse about Dharma. Right. So the famous verse in the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is also considered to be the fifth Veda by some people, although we don't really count it as Shruti, it's counted as Shmiti. But the Mahabharata in the Aranya Parva, Aranya means again the forest, the Aranyakas, remember the forest. So we have this statement, Ye cha Veda vido vipra, ye cha yatma vido janaha, te vadanti mahatmanam, Krishnam dharmam sanatanam. So sometimes we have people say, oh, okay, you're a Hindu, you're a Vaishnava, whatever it is like this. And we have people talking about Sanatana Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. You're a follower of the eternal principles, which we talked about before. Sanatana means eternal or perpetual, and Dharma means principles. Okay, so Krishna is considered in the Mahabharata to be the one who is the embodiment of all of this, the embodiment of the Vedas, the embodiment of Vedanta. And so this verse very nicely says this. Those who know the Vedas and the scholars who are thorough in Vedanta, Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. It talks about the Upanishads, or the philosophical section, which are the last of the four sections, the Samhitas, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas. The Upanishads are the last section, the philosophical section. So they are called Vedanta, the end of the Vedas. So those who thoroughly know the Shruti, the Vedas, and the Vedanta say that Lord Krishna is the most ancient form of Dharma. So we also have a statement here. This statement is coming from Manusmriti. Shmiti is a Dharma Shastra. It's a Shastra which deals, or a scripture, Shastra means scripture, which deals with Dharma. Angani Vedas Chatvaro Mimamsa Nyaya Vishtaraha Puranam Dharma Shastram Cha Vidyasyet Chaturdasa. The four Vedas, along with their 6 Vedangas, which we just talked about, the 6 supplements, what were they again? They are Shiksha, Chanda, Vyakarna, Nirukta, Jyotisha, and Kalpa, right? And the Mimamsa, Vedic principles of analysis, Nyaya, logic, which also includes Tarka, or dispute, right? Like that. The Puranas, the traditional texts, and the Dharma Shastras, cultural precepts, are the 14 sources of knowledge. So these are the 14 sources of knowledge in Vedic knowledge. This is from Manusmriti. Manusmriti is a Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastras come out of the Kalpa Vedanga. The Kalpa Vedanga becomes Kalpa Sutras based on Vedic ritualism, and they are elaborated in the Dharma Shastras. So again, Yajnavalkya, which we just talked about, who is a student of the Yajurveda and teacher of the Yajurveda, right? He has stated, Purana, Tarka or Nyaya, Mimamsa, Dharma Shastranga Mishritaha, Vedaha, Vedastanani Vidyanam, Dharmasya Cha Chaturdasaha. The Puranas, traditional texts, Nyaya, which also includes logic and disputation, Tarka, Mimamsa, the Vedic principles of analysis, the Dharma Shastras, cultural precepts, along with the 6 Vedangas, which we just talked about, which are supplements or explanatory texts to the Vedas. And the 4 Vedas are the focus of knowledge and precepts. That's according to Yajnavalkya. And similarly, we get from the Vishnu Purana, we get a more elaborate understanding, which tells us about these 14 Vidyasthanas, 14 places of, some people say 18, and some people say 14. But here we have Angani Vedas Chatvaro Mimamsa Nyaya Vistaraha Puranam Dharmashastram Cha Vidyasyetas Chaturdasaha, right? So we had this statement also from Manu. He's getting this from the Puranas, right? So it's backed up by Vishnu Purana. Again, it says the 4 Vedas along with 6 Vedangas, supplements, Mimamsa, Vedic principles of analysis, Nyaya, logic, the Puranas, traditional texts, and the Dharma Shastras, cultural precepts, are the 14 sources of knowledge. So, and the second verse in Vishnu Purana that goes after this, which Manu doesn't quote, Ayurvedo Dhanurvedo Gandharvas Chaiva, I think maybe, yeah, Gandharvas Chaiva Te Treyaha Artashastram Chachur Tanta Tu Vidya Ashta Dashaiva Taha. The Ayurveda, science of life, the Dhanurveda, military science, and the Gandharva Veda, musical science, these three, along with the fourth, Arthashastra, political science, make a total of 18 sources of knowledge. So now we've gone from the Vedas being one and being eternal, being the breath of the Lord, right? Being swata pramana, being fixed eternal knowledge and irrefutable truth, right? We have the ancillary supplements to them, the Vedangas, right? Those 6 Vedangas, right? Shiksha, Vyakarna, Nirukta, Jyotish, Kalpa, and Shiksha, Vyakarna, Nirukta, Jyotish, Kalpa, and Chandas, right? And then we have, on top of that, we have these 4. These 4, we have Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, and we have the Arthashastra, like that, according to Vishnu Purana. Now, again, these are also sometimes called Upavedas. Veda means, of course, we understood Veda means the Shruti, right? Upaveda means that which is not Shruti, but it's a supplement to the Shruti, right? Or appendix to the Shruti. And for the Rig Veda, it's Ayurveda. For the Yajurveda, Dhanurveda. For the Samaveda, Gandhara Veda. For the Atharva Veda, Arthashastra. Now, in some places, some authorities say, this is the listing coming from the dictionary. So some places say actually that the Ayurveda belongs to the Atharva Veda and not to the Rig Veda, and some say that the Dhanurveda belongs to the Atharva Veda, and then also some people say that they add another one here, the Shilpa Shastra, which is a knowledge of arts and architecture, or science of architecture. That's also considered sometimes to be a 4th Upaveda, but it's not included. We don't have a pramana. We don't have a sloka. Remember what pramana means? Pramana means, what is it? Prajaksha, Anumana, and Shabda. We don't have a Shabda. We don't have a sloka, right? Which is a sound, an authoritative statement. We don't have an authoritative statement telling us this, but the dictionary has listed it like that. So sometimes if the dictionary has done that, we can find an authoritative statement saying that. Sometimes there's some discrepancies, and so we have an easy way to remember. Let's have again, how do we remember the Vedangas? We remember the Vedangas in an easy way if they're put into poetry form, into a sloka, into a verse. So here they are put into a verse. Shiksha kalpo vyakaranam, niruktam chandasam chayaha, jyotisam ayanam chaiva, vedangani sarevatu. Right? So here we have shiksha, kalpa, vyakarna, nirukta, chanda, jyotish, right? These are the 6 Vedanganis, the Veda Anganis, the limbs of the Veda. Sad means 6. So phonetics, shiksha, ritual, kalpa, grammar, vyakarna, etymology, nirukta, meta, chandas, and astronomy, jyotisha, are the 6 limbs of the Vedas. 6 limbs of the Vedas. So, and here is a sloka to remind us what parts of the analogy of the Veda Purusha, the Veda being like a person, what parts of the person are considered to be the Vedangas. So the limbs of the Veda Purusha, the personality of the Veda, we can say. If we conceive of the Veda as being a person, right, we can then easily remember the Vedangas by this verse. Chanda padao, chandaha. The meter is said to be his feet. Tu Vedasya, of the Veda. Hastao, the 2 hands. Pado means 2 feet. Hastao means 2 hands. Right. Hastao kalpo. Right. Kalpota. Patyate. It is said, patyate, that kalpa is the 2 hands. Right. Ritual kalpa is described as his hands. Right. Jodisham ayanam chakshuhur. Right. Jodisham is known as the eyes. Right. And niruktam shrotram uchate. Niruktam is understood as being the ears. It's called its ears. Yeah. So we've got chanda, kalpa, Jyotisha and Nirukta. What about the other two? So then we have Shiksha. Shiksha, phonetics, is said to be the nose. Shiksha grana. Remember, we were talking about grana, means the nose. Shiksha grana tu vedasya. Mukam, the mouth. Mukam vak vyakaranam shmitam. Right? The mouth. Their grammar is remembered as its mouth. Tasmat sangam adityeva brahma loke mahiyate. Therefore, one who has studied the Vedas along with the auxiliaries, the Vedangas, is honored in the realm of Brahman. The realm of Brahman means the spiritual sky, means the abode of the Lord, Brahmaloka. Here it's Brahmaloka. When we see Brahma, the word Brahma with a long A, it means the Chaturmukha Brahma. It means the creator of the universe, the four-headed Brahma. But when we see Brahma simply by itself, it means the supreme. It means Krishna. It means God. So here we have again. Here we have again. We've listed the Vedangas, the 6 Vedangas, and we've given so Shiksha, phonetics, Chanda, prosody, both of them helping us to speak the Vedas, to chant, to chant Sanskrit. But then we have to understand it through grammar, Vyakarna, and Nirukta, etymology, word meanings, right? And then to be able to see Jyotisha, astronomy, and be able to perform rituals or perform worship of the Lord, that is Kalpa. So a little bit more about these things in depth. If we break those down, Shiksha phonetics is made up of what? So in the Taittiriya Upanishad, in the beginning of Taittiriya Upanishad, it says, Shiksham vyākya syamaha varna swaraha matra balam samasantanaha ityukta shiksha dhyayaha. That is the first lesson of Shiksha. That is the first lesson of phonetics, Vedic phonetics, is given in Taittiriya Upanishad in the very first statement, right? So what does it talk about? It divides phonetics up into 6 parts. The Varna means letter or syllable. In Sanskrit, especially in Devanagari, now Sanskrit can be written down. Before Sanskrit was written down, of course, these Vedangas were there because the Veda was spoken. It was simply spoken and not written down. But after it became written down in Indus Valley script, then in Brahmi script, then in Devanagari, in Nandi Nagari. There are many, many other scripts all over India and actually all over Southeast Asia. And even coming to the West in foreign countries, like in the Latin script, all of these scripts originally came from the Brahmi script. All of these scripts originally came from the Brahmi script. So these scripts are syllabic in nature. They're syllabic in nature. So we have to learn, first of all, we have to learn the script, but then after we learn the script, the reason why there is no mention here of learning a script is because this science is older than scripts. It's older than writing. So that's why there's no mention of learning scripts. So the first thing is to learn the script. But even without learning the scripts, if we just hear the letters, e, u, the different letters of the alphabet and learn how to pronounce them, then then that's the first thing in the science of phonetics. Then in Sanskrit, there is 2 parts to Sanskrit. There's Vedic Sanskrit, which is the Shruti. The Shruti or the Veda is in Vedic Sanskrit, which has different tones. And in classical Sanskrit or non-Vedic Sanskrit, there are no tones. It's monotone. So we know that there are 2 different tones. The swara tones in 3 Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, both Yajurveda, Shukla Yajurveda, and Krishna Yajurveda, and in the Atharva Veda are 3. So there's a high tone called Swarita. There's a middle tone called Udata, and there's a lower tone called Anudata. So these are 3 tones. There are 3 tones there. So we have to also learn the tones because the difference in tone will give us a difference in meaning of the word in Vedic Sanskrit. Now, there's nothing like that in classical Sanskrit, so we don't have to worry about that. It's monotone. So swara is another part of the Vedanga Shiksha, pronunciation, phonetics. Matra means the duration of vowels, and the duration of vowels can be one matra. A matra is the time it takes to clap your hand or blink your eye, slap your knee, like that. It's a prosodial instant. So we can say, if that's short, called Hrasva. Dirga is twice as long. It's long. Dirga. Twice. Ah, right? Then we have even longer. If it's 3 or more, we will see in the script a number which tells us how long to hold the vowel, because vowels can be held for a longer time. So, ah, right? So this is in Sanskrit, in Patanjali's Mahabhasya, he says, Ekamatra bhaved hrasvo, dvimatra dirga uchite, trimatra stupato gyeyo, vyanjana adamatrakam. A vyanjana, or a consonant, is only half a measure, half an instant, because it needs a vowel to be added to it in order to be pronounced correctly. So, this is all in the science of phonetics, all in the science of phonetics. So the duration which we hold the vowels are letters which can be prolated, they can be extended because of our breath, right? Whereas consonants cannot. They're called sparshas, or touched, simply touched, quickly. So this is called mantra. Bala is the force of articulation. In the alphabet, in the Sanskrit alphabet, we have letters that we produce, which are produced with less force or more force. We have k, but we also have ka, and ka, right? So we have one, and when we transliterate that into Roman script or Latin script, we add an H to show that there's more breath being used or more force being used, and this is called bala. This is also a part of phonetics. Sama is the musical quality of the recitation in phonetics, and santana means that we have to combine all of these things together in a way that doesn't distort the meaning of the utterance, the meaning of the utterance. So this is a little bit about phonetics. Moving on to chandas. Chandas is prosody. Now, all of these things, there are great shastras explaining all of these things in great detail, these Vedangas, like that. And I have the links if anybody wants, either directly in Sanskrit, or they want with the English translation, these Vedangas, the science of these Vedangas. I have all the quotes and people can just ask. So chandas, different meters are there based on the number of syllables in the Veda. And then in non-Vedic, so we have the number of syllables, for example, in a Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Bhajat Aham Tvat Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishyami Ma Suchaha. 4 lines of 8 syllables, or Gayatri mantra, Tat Savitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat, like that. So we have 3 lines of 8 syllables. Actually, that's not a very good example, because the first line there has only got 7 syllables in the Veda, but there's a possibility of having more or less 1 or 2 syllables in that meter for Gayatri mantra. So but this is all very, very complex. But anyway, usually we count the number of syllables. In non-Vedic also, there's a possibility to simply not count the syllables, but to simply go with a rhythm. Adi Shankaracharya's Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam, Bhaja Mudamate is an example of not counting the syllables, but simply going with a particular beat, like that. So this is chandas, or prosody, like that. And there are sutras for all of these things. There are Shiksha Sutras, Pradishakyas, and Shikshas, all right, to explain. There's also sutras for prosody done by Pingala, which we'll talk about. Vyakarna is grammar, learning grammar. Grammar is, of course, the 3 greats of grammar are Panini, Katyayana, and Patanjali, who wrote the Dhatupada and Astadhyayi, Panini, the Vartika's explanations on that of Katyayani, and the great commentary by Patanjali, right? So this is Sanskrit grammar. And then we have Nirukta, etymology, for which we have Yaskacharya, or Yaska, who has written the Nirukta and Nigantu, which is about the meaning of words down to the letter of the word. Each letter in a word in Sanskrit has a meaning that adds to its meaning. And although even up here we get meaning from words from Dhatupad, Dhatupad perhaps should be put in Nirukta, because it's a list of roots, dhatus, by Panini himself, giving meanings to roots. So then we have Jyotisha, or the Vedanga Jyotisha of Lagada. And Jyotisha, we can also break down into different sections here: Gola, cosmology; Ganita, mathematics; Hora, which is horoscopy, including Muhurta timings. So Muhurta means it's that the original reason for astrology was, or astronomy, was to find the perfect auspicious moment to perform the sacrifice, and to find the inauspicious moment when not to perform the sacrifice. And there are books on this, like, for example, my students, I usually give them Akala Prakashika, which is a very good book on, a written Vaishnava book on Muhurta. Hastareka, which just simply means lines on the palm, but it can also mean different bodily signs. Varshapala, which means omens; and Prashna, or divination or inquiry. So then we have Kalpa, and in the Kalpa, which is ritualism, remember, from the Vedangas, the Kalpa is divided up. There are Kalpa Sutras, and the Kalpa Sutras have led to a division of Shrauta Sutras, which deal with Vedic sacrifices; Shulpa, which help us to set up the sacrificial arena, which deals with geometry and the setting up of arenas like that; Griha Sutras, which deal with the Smarta ceremonies, which are, for example, the different samskaras that we know, the 16 samskaras of marriage and garbhadana, impregnation, and namakarna, naming. All these different things are from the Griha Sutras. And Dharma Shastra Sutras, which are later on became also branched out to the Dharma Shastras, like Manusmriti and all the different Shmitis, 18 Shmitis. And the Dharma Sutras were the beginning of that. Now, on top of that, we have Lord Krishna, when he went to Gurukula, right? He understood all these. He was taught all of these, and he also understood the 64 arts, which came along with these 14 vidyas. These are the 14 vidyas, or 18 vidyas sometimes said, and then we have the 64 arts. So I have a list of those 64 arts here, which we can't go into at this time. And so I think this is a good introduction to Vedas, Vedic knowledge, and Vedangas. And we haven't really gone into Agamas much. We can go into Agamas sometime later, but let's stop here for now. If anybody wants to ask some questions, we have a WhatsApp group, and I can post English translations to all the different Vedangas and books to read on all the different Vedangas for everybody. I didn't want to go into specific details today. This is an overview. If anybody wants to learn any of these different Vedangas or any of these Vidyasthanas, then they can contact me directly, or the London College of Vedic Studies, and we can arrange for that. Either I can put you onto a teacher who can teach us. Just remember, I'm also a student, so I may not be the greatest person to teach any particular thing, but whatever little I know, I will certainly pass on to people. And I would love to also be a part of learning more about Vedic culture and Vedic knowledge along with you. So thank you very much. So can we explain one more time about what a Vidyasthana is? Okay, so we have that. Madan Mohan is asking me, what's a Vidyasthana? So Vidya means knowledge. Vid means to know. Vidya means knowledge. And so Sthana means a place of knowledge. So Vidyasthana would be, Vidyasthana would mean we delineate a particular area of knowledge, a field of knowledge. So Vidyasthana is a field of knowledge. So we have those slokas, which if you can go on and look at the recording of the class, and you can see the slokas, which give you the definitions of those different Vidyasthanas. So we have, first of all, the Vedas, four Vedas, right? So 4 Vedas, even though one of them is divided into 2, Shukla and Krishna Yajurveda. So 4 Vedas, basically. Add to those the Vedangas, 6 Vedangas. 4 and 6 is 10. Add to those the Ayurveda, the Dhanurveda, the Gandharva Veda, and the Arthashastra, and you get 14. 14 areas of study, of knowledge, Vedic knowledge. But you also have as I said in the dictionary, it also said about Shilpa Shastra. So there may be slightly different, but we gave the slokas defining the 14 usual, and there are 18. Some people say 18. So there's different ideas. So there are all these different fields of knowledge, and they're all meant to help us understand the Veda. So what is ritual? The answer is, what is ritual? Well, ritual, kalpa means ritual. Ritual, you can look it up in the dictionary, but ritual basically is anything that we do, like sadhana. Sadhana means a method of a religious practice which is meant to bring us to a goal. So normally in knowledge we have these three ideas. We have tattva, hita, and purushartha. So purushartha means what are the goals. Artha means the gain or goal. Purusha means human beings. Human beings have four goals. They are dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So we have religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and ultimately liberation. So these are four goals of human life. Everybody engages in these things to a certain amount. Everybody has to eat, everybody has to drink, everybody has to have shelter. So there has to be some economic development. There has to be there is some sense gratification that goes along naturally with the body. Right. So economic development, we have to do this in a righteous way. Right. We should try to do these things in a righteous way. So that's dharma, religiosity. And then ultimately we want to look for leaving this material world and getting beyond that. That is called moksha. Moksha means getting beyond that. So whatever helps us to get those things can be rituals. There can be different types of rituals. There are things that we do every day, which are called nitya rituals. There are naimitika, things that we follow occasionally, like Ekadasi or some other holy day, right? And then there are kamya. There are rituals that we perform for a particular purpose, like we might be performing a ritual like Garbhadhana Samskara if we want to have children, right? So the rituals are meant to help us to gain a goal. So first of all, we have to understand the Vidyasthanas are about, Vedangas are about understanding what is truth. Truth means tattva. So in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, they say Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandha means the truth of what's going on. Abhideya means how we get to the goal, and Prayojana is the goal. So normally in Sanskrit, we call these tattva, hita, purushartha. Purushartha is the goal. Here we are here now. So this is tattva. What is the principle? What's happening right now? What's the truth right now of our situation? How do we get to our prayojana or our purushartha? And tattva, hita is the means to get to the goal. So first of all, understand where we are. Then where do we want to go? And then how do we get there? So that is the system. That's where ritual comes in, like that. So different types of rituals. In the Gita, Krishna also says of rituals, I'm japa, right? I'm japosmi. I am japa. Japa, janmanishad papanasana iti japaha. So japa is what? It's the process of janmanishad papanasana. The process of, it's not just chanting. It's not just chanting. We can chant anything. We can chant Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, but it won't get us anywhere. The real purpose of japa is japa, janmanishad papanasana, to destroy sins. Papa is nishad. Papanasana is destroyed. Janmanishad, no more birth, no more rebirth, and no more sins. That is the process of japa. So Krishna says, I'm japa. So what does that mean? It just doesn't mean we recite anything and we can say that's Krishna. That's his spiritual. No, if we do a particular ritual, it has to be done in a particular way according to the way it is described in the Shastra. So if we look in the Upanishads, iti shodasakam namnam kali kalmashanashanam mata parantaram nanyat sarva vedeshu drishyate Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's right there in the Upanishads, right? That is a ritual. That is a ritual act. That's a sadhana. That is taking us from where we are now to our goal, So that's an example of a ritual. There are other rituals and there are other goals and there are other things. So that's what ritual is. You can go on forever talking about rituals because there's so many. Ritual's got a bad rap. The meaning of ritual, some people think it means nothing. It just, it's just something you do and it doesn't mean anything. No, it has a purpose. So 2 hands raised. Yes. So anybody who has their hand raised, one person. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hare
yeah,
Krishna.
Vamsidhari Prabhu, if you like to go ahead first, and then Satyakumar Nimai Prabhu.
Yes. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for doing this session. Very grateful to you. Of the six Vedangas, I am very interested in first five of the Vedangas. So Kalpa, which is ritual, is not what I'm naturally attracted to, but I would like to go extremely deeper on the phonetics, the chandas, the meters, Vyakran, etymology, which is Nirukta meaning, and I want to spend as much time as I can because 12 years is what Prabhupada said. I'm already like half of my life gone, so I just want to focus now. My main purpose is to understand all the Bhakti Shastras, like in and out,
All
like
the which
bha
shastras?
Bhakti Shastras. So beginning with Srimad
Bhakti shastras. Okay,
Bhakti
Bhakti
Shastras.
shastras. Okay.
So beginning with Bhagavatam and then Nectar of Devotion. Of course, the English version of Prabhupada is amazing, but when you read the same stuff in Sanskrit, then you can relish it in much, much more depth.
Okay.
And then
So
I would like to go to Jiva
okay.
Goswami's books.
I hear a lot of wishes there. We also wish for unlimited knowledge, but if we one step at a time, if we can focus, is there something specific that you wanted to ask, or is there something specific that you wanted to focus
How
on
do I
learning?
how do I begin this journey?
How do you
So
begin? How do you
yes,
begin? How do we begin?
how do I begin? Because I have studied Hindi all my childhood.
Okay.
So I can pronounce somewhat so those pronunciations are good. I'm trying to, by mercy of Prabhupada, trying to recite Srimad Bhagavatam, like memorize it.
Right.
So
okay. All right. So let's just take it one step at a time here. So in the beginning, I said Prabhupada explained that Sanskrit is a gateway to education. So now there's two ways of approaching this, right? One way is that if we can't learn Sanskrit, we can do it through some translations. So there's many translations in Hindi, many translations in other languages, even in English, of all these things. Ultimately, if somebody can learn Sanskrit, it's good. Sanskrit is also an ocean. Maybe we can spend a whole lifetime and not know Sanskrit completely, like that. So what normally happened in the Gurukul system is that people would learn grammar first, and then they would learn a particular set of etymology, a particular dictionary. Some people would memorize Amarakosha, which is a rhyming dictionary, or they would learn, for example, a word in Sanskrit can mean something different in a different context. So the word Vedanta, for example, Prabhupada explains that Vedanta means the end of all knowledge, Veda Anta. But if we break Vedanta in a different way, Ve means without. Danta means teeth. So Vedanta also means somebody who's got no teeth. So when I'm reading a book on philosophy, the word Vedanta means the end of all knowledge. When I'm reading a book on dentistry, the word Vedanta means something completely different. It means the person has no teeth. So, and as I was saying, the words, then we also have to understand how the word is changed like that. So two ways of attaining knowledge. One is through our own language that we know, whether it be Hindi or English or whatever it is, right? And the other is by learning another language, Sanskrit. If we're lucky to know Sanskrit or whatever, that would be good. So my suggestion to people who, like myself, who are older like that, maybe skip the idea of learning Sanskrit and try to work through authoritative translations of these things like that. So now you say you want to study Bhakti Shastras. So the Shastras, the scriptures of Bhakti, are also voluminous. And there are commentaries on these things. So you say, if you want to study the Bhagavatam is there. We have Prabhupada's translation and purports on the Bhagavatam, his commentary. There are also other commentaries on the Bhagavatam. So can we go through? There are other commentaries on the Bhagavatam which are according to Vaishnava Sampradayas and according to other Sampradayas also, like that. So we might want to look at. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that we should look at Sridhar Swami's commentary, which is an early commentary. Normally, what people do is because, for example, there's two meanings to words. There's the literal meaning of a word, and then there's the meaning of a word which is not literal. So the example given in Shastra is Gangayam, Grama Gangayam. So Grama means a village. Gangayam means on the Ganges, right? So when I read that, am I talking about a village which is literally submerged in the Ganges? Because if I take that literally, it means the Ganges is flowing all over this village. So that may be, there may be a situation where a village is flooded and the village is underneath, or somebody made a dam and the water just rose above the village. But normally Gangayam on the village means on the bank of the village, on the bank of the river, on the bank of the river Ganges. So we have to understand when something is an analogy, when something is literal or something is not literal. If I say, look, a tiger is about to attack me, right? Then I'm saying, oh, there's this animal which is trying to attack me. But if I say he is a tiger amongst men, I don't mean that a person turned into a tiger. I mean that the person is very strong like a tiger. So it's an analogy. So we have to understand when something is literal, so words have these two meanings. So
Prabhuji, where can I find the best teacher? Because conversations can go very long, and so where can I find the best teacher to actually learn Sanskrit? Because if it takes 12 years, and if I start now, then I will have decent time to actually go through.
Okay, so I mean, maybe we don't have time to go into it all here, but there are many people. There's people who are teaching Sanskrit. If you want to learn Sanskrit, there's different methods also of learning Sanskrit. I described the Vedanga of Panini. If we look at this is the method that people usually do in the Gurukulas. Right? They follow a book like this. This is called Laghu Siddhanta Comedy. Laghu Siddhanta Comedy. So we had, I was describing that this explains Sanskrit grammar, and it's according to Panini's system of sutras, right? So it's very technical but it's very short because it's in sutras, so it's easy to memorize. So in the Gurukula, people would memorize all these sutras. Panini wrote a book called Astadhyayi. Astadhyayi means eight chapters, and there's about 4,000 sutras. And in those 4,000 little sutras, he describes the whole of classical and Vedic Sanskrit in those 4,000. So if you're able to memorize those and understand what they mean, you know Sanskrit grammar. Now you don't know any word meanings. Then you have to know a dictionary. You have to know word meanings, right? So that's one way to learn Sanskrit. Another way to learn Sanskrit is the Western method, more of a methodical way of learning Sanskrit bit by bit. I have some beginner Sanskrit classes which I teach, but there are other people who know Sanskrit much better than me. I don't know Sanskrit.
So maybe after the session, maybe I'll get in touch with you separately.
Sure.
Because more people have questions.
We have a WhatsApp group for the session. So just post something in the WhatsApp group, and we can get together. I can suggest some places to learn Sanskrit and some ways to learn Sanskrit. So there's basically the traditional method, which I don't recommend because it's very, very difficult. But if you're interested in that, you can do that. I show you the book. And then there's a more non-traditional method, and people learn like that. Or you can go and you can learn about all these things in other languages.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. And someone else can unmute. Anybody who's next? Sachi Kumar.
Yes, Sachi Kumar Nimai.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much. I was just reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita recently. Lord Chaitanya said his guru said he is a fool and he should just chant Hare Krishna.
Good idea. Excellent. Excellent. So you just wasted 5 pounds, is that right?
I mean, I'm saying that because the other thought that I think in the purport Prabhupada's maybe saying that, rather than studying the Vedas, his guru his spiritual master was suggesting that he's chanting Hare Krishna. But then my thought was that maybe, and I think Bhakti Raghava Swami gives this idea that Krishna and Balaram, they learnt um, in a particular way, Rishi Goraksha, in a practical way. But then there are those people who can study the Vedas according to their capacity. So I guess my question is, to what extent would we need to evaluate where one is as a student and one's capacity, one's aptitude for learning before as a kind of prerequisite for entering into the study, if that makes any sense? Because I'm
Well,
also kind of
I mean, that happens. I mean, we've all been to school. People, the teachers in the school, the administrators of the school, they evaluate people, especially in higher learning, that you have an entrance exam even. So that's not for the student to say, that's for the teacher to say. Right? So
exactly.
the teacher will say, you are qualified for this course and you should take another course. We'll say to somebody else, you should take a different course. Yeah. So if the question is, how do we know ourselves? I think it's self-evaluation is very good. Very, very good. We can try to evaluate our own level. I mean, how old am I? How much effort do I want to put into doing something? Do I really, you can learn anything. Anybody can learn anything if they have the interest. If they have the interest. Now, if you have an interest and you don't have an aptitude, if you don't have a capacity, then you may not learn as much of the subject as you'd like, but you still will learn something. So the question is, how much knowledge do we need to attain our goal? As I was saying in the last questioner, there's where we are now, what our goal is, and how to get there. So what is our goal? If our goal is simply, if the goal of all this is simply to chant Hare Krishna and go back to Godhead and, go to Krishna and all this sort of thing, if that's the goal, then there's not a lot of study that needs to be done. Yeah. But if the goal is to enhance that in some way, is to have more understanding, like the last question, well, more understanding of the Bhagavatam, more understanding of the scriptures, bhakti scriptures. If the goal is to enhance that, how can I enhance that? What's the easiest way for me to enhance that? So is it easy for me to spend 12 years to learn Sanskrit to enhance that or not? I would say most people are going to say, at least if I'm going to learn Sanskrit, at least along the way, I should also be studying some other things, because life is transient. We don't know when we're going to be here, when we're going to leave here. So we should try to do things with the aim of an ultimate goal, but also we should do things at the same time which give us more immediate the goal coming more immediately. And so when we think about ourselves, we think about what's the benefit that we can achieve and how quickly we can achieve that benefit. So if we can self-evaluate, that's great. If we can't self-evaluate, then we should try to find somebody who's more knowledgeable in the particular area that we're interested in and ask them what's the quickest method. What do you think is the best method? And maybe we want to take 2 or 3 opinions to that of persons that we respect and who know the subject, right? So self-evaluation, I think, is great. Yeah. And then and I think most teachers will say, look, if you're interested and you have a desire to learn, I will teach you, or I'll try to teach you, or whatever I know, I'll try to teach you, or we can learn together. And if it, see how it works out. I don't know if I answered the question. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for your response. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it definitely gives me it's definitely part of the inquiry, as you mentioned at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. We have one question which was privately sent. So the question is, if one wants to learn Veda, I have seen there are so many books with English translation available. Is this effective without understanding or learning the Vedangas and Agamas?
Okay, so somebody wants to learn Veda. What does it mean to learn Veda? They want to just simply learn to chant the. See, in Shiksha, in Paniniya Shiksha, for example, which is one of the Shikshas, right, a very famous one, it says that chanting a mantra without understanding the meaning is not good. Chanting a mantra by reading it from a book is not good. Chanting a mantra in a low tone is not good. There's a verse which explains all the bad ways to know the Veda and all the good ways to know the Veda. Okay, so if we go by that Vedanga, by those verses, then what exactly is meant by learning the Veda? Learning the Veda doesn't mean just knowing the sound. It just like I said, Brahmanosya Mukamasid Bahu Rajanyakataha Uru Tarasya Dvaishaha Padbyagam Shudro Ajayata. Right? So I know the Sanskrit. Do I know the meaning? I explained the meaning in the class. So I also know the meaning. Right? So we should know that knowing the Veda itself, just chanting, some people will say just chanting the mantra is enough, like that, without knowing the meaning. And in some cases, we can rationalize that. For example, chant Hare Krishna, right? Somebody goes to the laundromat and it's called Washa Rama. And he says Washa Rama, he gets benefit because Rama is a name of God, right? So even without knowing what Rama means, he gets benefit by saying Rama, like that. There's a story of Valmiki, is very, very, very famous, that Narada Rishi told him that you should perfect your life. And he said, well, I'm a dacoit, I'm a murderer, I want to perfect killing people. And Narada said, well, you could chant the name of death, Mara, right? So he was saying Mara, 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 Rama, and it became Rama. It became Rama, and he became purified. So even without knowing what he was doing, he became purified. So it's possible chanting the Vedic mantras alone, or learning the Veda, just learning how to pronounce Vedic correctly is good, like that. But it's also possible that we can learn the meaning, and we should learn the meaning. In most cases, learning the meaning is important. In Chandogya Upanishad, there's a story of a person called Svetaketu, right? And he went to a sacrifice, and all the Brahmins were chanting mantras, and he asked the Brahmins, do you know the meaning of the mantras? Because if you don't know the meaning of the mantras, your head will fall off, right? This is what he said to him. And then he said, do you know the devata of this mantra? Do you know the rishi of this mantra? Do you know the purpose of this mantra, the viniyogaha, right? Every time we chant a mantra, we should know. We touch our head and we say rishi, and we touch our nose and we say chanda. We touch our heart and we say devata, the particular devata, the rishi, the chanda, the rishi, the meter, and the devata of that mantra. Asha Srimadastaksha Mantrasya Bhadragashram Vasi Shriman Narayana Rishi Devi Gayatri Tandaha Shriman Narayana Devata, like that. So this is called mantra nyasa. So this is before chanting a mantra, we should know where the mantra came from. There's a very big book called forgetting the name of it now, but anyway, I can just blanking on it. There's a book which tells all the Vedic mantras, all the mantras in the Vedas, which devata is addressing, which rishi spoke it, or rishika, which lady rishi or male rishi, because there were lady rishis also, right? And then which devata it's and which chanda, which meter it's and we should know all these things. According to Chandogya Upanishad, Svetaketu said, if you don't know those things, your head will fall off, like that. What does he mean? He doesn't mean literally your head is going to fall off. He's saying that you will not get the full benefit of the mantra without knowing these things. So that is why normally before chanting a mantra, we should remember those things. In Hari Bhakti Vilas, written by Sanatana and Gopal Bhatta Goswamis, there's a section which says before we chant the mantra, we should do this. And we should remember the rishi, who gave us the mantra, the meter that the mantra is chanted in, and the devata, which is it's addressed to, and the Viniyoga, the purpose of the mantra. What's the purpose? Right before we even sit down, Asan mantrasya, Merupristha rishihi, Devi Gayatri Chandaha, Paramatma Devata, Asane Viniyoga, whatever it is, we should know those things. Now, not everybody knows those things. Do they still chant the mantras? Yes. Do they still get the same benefit? Maybe, maybe not, like that. So there's a system, there's a traditional system, and then there's people who deviate from the traditional system a little bit for some reason, lack of time or whatever. And so the thing is, I try to teach people what is the traditional thing. It's authentic. This is the authentic traditional understanding and method. At the same time, I understand that sometimes people vary from the traditional authentic method. If we go all over, ritualism is chanting of mantras and things like that. There's a great science of mantra shastra. There are many, many books on mantra shastra. They'll tell you so many things. So depends. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but if somebody wants to know the Veda, exactly what do they mean? If I just want to know the meaning of the Veda, the meaning of the Veda is explained in Mahabharata, Ramayana, the Puranas. This is the meaning of the Veda is explained, is more exactly explained. In the meaning of the philosophy of the Veda is given in Vedanta Sutras, the Prasthanatrayi, the Gita, the Vishnu Sahasranam, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras. These are the main texts which give the meaning of the Vedas, like that. If we can even say the Bhagavatam, studying the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says the first verse of the Bhagavatam, Janmadyasya yatonvayaditaritas chati swabhijjana swarata, right? It starts out like that, Janmadyasya yataha, which is the beginning of Vedanta Sutra. So according to the Goswamis of Vrindavan, the Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. In other sampradayas than the Gaudiya Sampradaya, they had commentaries on the Vedanta Sutras. In the Gaudiya Sampradaya, they said, we have the Bhagavatam, like that. It's a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutras, the understanding of the Vedas. So Gaudiyas may say, well, all we have to do is study the Bhagavatam. That's fine. But even then, the Gaudiyas also have their commentary on the Vedanta Sutras written by Baladev Vidyabhushana, the Govinda Bhashya, and which was written in the middle of the 18th century. And what do you mean by learning the Vedas? Learning the meaning of the Vedas or learning the actual, words of the Vedas? And then learning the Vedas means what? Which Veda are you going to learn? Rig Veda, Yajur Veda? Amongst Yajur Veda, you're going to learn Shukla Yajur Veda or Krishna Yajur Veda? Which branch of Krishna Yajur Veda and which branch of Shukla Yajur Veda are you going to learn? So Veda is Ananta, Veda is unlimited. So when somebody says, I want to learn the Vedas, I have to learn. Do you want to learn the meaning? Do you want to learn the essence? Do you want to learn the actual verses? What exactly do you mean? The question itself is unlimited. So the answer has to also be unlimited. So if that person wants to, if I want to drill down exactly on what that person wants to learn, then I can give some advice, Otherwise, without exactly what do you want to learn, it's not possible to answer the question. Do you understand?
Yeah, Veena, is that okay? You asked the question? Yeah, she said yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very happy if somebody says to me, limited question, specific question, I want to learn Purusha Suktam. Prabhupada personally told me, learn Purusha Suktam, right? He wrote in the Bhagavatam, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, wherever we install deities, I've installed a lot of deities around the world in ISKCON, everybody should chant Purusha Suktam. I was in Melbourne, he came, he said, no more Bhagavatam class, everybody learn Purusha Suktam. Like that. So we all learn Purusha Suktam, like that. Which Purusha Suktam do you want to learn? There's a Samaveda one, there's a Rig Veda one, there's a Yajur Veda one. It's in every Veda. And there's different, so you can learn one Krishna Yajur Veda, you can learn Shukla Yajur Veda. So specifically, if somebody says to me, I want to learn Purusha Suktam, and I want to learn Krishna Yajur Veda Purusha Suktam, yeah, I can help you. If you say I want to learn Samveda Purusha Suktam, I will set you up with a teacher, he can teach you that one. Okay? But these are specific requests here. So first of all, we learn general things. We learn, this is an introduction here. This is not a teaching session. Nobody's learning anything. They're just learning a framework here. We're setting up a framework of Vedic knowledge. And then people can say, oh, I'm interested in that thing. Okay, if you're interested in that particular thing, then we take it slowly and we go to that point where you can be more specific. So first of all, that's why we say Sanskrit's the gateway to education, because learning Sanskrit or learning the language, now we know a language, we know English, we know Hindi, we know some languages. So we can use those languages to learn more knowledge. But we have to understand, as long as we're not using Sanskrit, we may come up with some of those problems that, because Sanskrit is the way perfectly to understand the Vedic knowledge, whereas other languages may not be perfect. So yeah, I mean, can't answer every question on every general question in an introductory session, but specific questions, if somebody has more specific questions. So we're talking about, somebody's written here other English I've seen English translations. Yeah, so there are English translations to things, there are Hindi translations to things. Any language that you like, there are translations to things. The translations may or may not perfectly reflect the subject matter. So that's why we have to investigate. We have to investigate Vedangas and maybe understand a little bit like that. So I mentioned Mahakala Chaitanya, a book, which I forgot the name. Okay, mentioned a book. Okay. Any other questions? I think we went really long today.
Oh,
Yeah.
we have tons of questions, Prabhuji, but they will be on WhatsApp or in personal communication.
Sure. Just post questions in WhatsApp, and I'll do my best to find the answers for people in WhatsApp. Try to make the questions more specific rather than, how do I learn the Vedas? How do you learn the Vedas? Learn Sanskrit, learn Astadhyayi, learn all these things, which will take you 2 lifetimes or 3 lifetimes, and you can learn the Vedas. The Vedas are infinite, remember? So if you have a lot of time, you can try to learn them. But if you have a specific thing in the Vedas you want to learn, or a specific subject which we identified in our outline, then we can point you more in a specific direction.
Thank you.
Cool. I think there's no more questions.
Good.
So if there's no more questions, I think we're gonna let
That
you
means
go.
everybody agrees. No more questions. Everybody agrees. Everybody understood everything. Great.
And everyone can post on the WhatsApp group. They will have access there. And yeah, we really appreciate your class, Prabhu. It's been amazing class.
Yeah, I want to apologize to those persons who know half of the class was just an introduction to the Vedic understanding of epistemology. And I want to apologize to everybody who already has read those things in Prabhupada's books. But I just thought we needed to go into that step by step in order to come to the point of what the Vedangas are, like that. And we didn't even touch on the Agamas yet. But these are all part of the Vedic. It's all part of the Vedic knowledge. And please do go and have a look at some of the things that I posted in the chat, some of the links like that. And if people want links directly to the books that are translations, at least in English, that I know of, and maybe if you want Sanskrit, I can also give you, or maybe Hindi, just let me know. And the links are there for books that, to study specific Vedangas and specific subjects like that. So just ask for those links and you can have the links. But as with everything, when we study a book, it's also good to have somebody to tell you, somebody who knows the subject to tell you. Now, I'm not that person. I don't know all these subjects. I'm just telling you that it's like I'm telling you there's a university there called the Vedas and Vedangas and Chaturdasa Vidyastans or Astadasa Vidyastans. They're there. And there's university courses for that. I'm not the professor. I'm a student like you. So I've just tasted a tip of the iceberg here. like that. I'm just presenting to you the possibilities. So you please decide where you want to focus your attention. And I will do my best to point you in the right direction, but I cannot teach you because I am also a student.
Prabhu, you're an amazing teacher, and we've had so much glories, and it's been an honor to have you here today. Really appreciate it. It's been amazing. So we look forward to your next class, definitely next week.
Thank you. And next week we'll try to talk a little bit more about the Agamas. And on the WhatsApp group, if people have more specific, if they want to go into any specific Vedanga, we can look at some things. For example, introduction to Vedic chanting, something that we can go through, or we can go through introduction to Paninian grammar, or something, you know, whatever. What if you want to go into a little bit of because I only gave the structure and I didn't. And also remember, I can't teach you fully these things. So, you know, some things we can go a little bit more into depth, and you can see, do I want to continue to try and learn this or not? So please just let me know on the WhatsApp group, and we'll try to do something next week like that.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
So, Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Garavavahe, Tejashvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. So we hope that everybody has peace in those areas.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class.
Om Namo